Today we're looking at the Subaru WRX, not the STI. I'm going to talk a little bit about the STI throughout the review. WRX has grown in popularity, especially when they changed the body of the last iteration to give it the more muscular STI look on all trim levels. That's when sales really exploded. Now the WRX sells more than the STI, but they're very close to being a 50-50 split. The STI is growing in popularity because it really is a lot of bang for the buck. The price of the WRX starts around $30,000 in Canada and runs up to about $36,000 for the Sport with the tech package. This is the Sport model that we have here. If you get into the STI, it's substantially more money and competes with much more expensive cars. This car really is a performance bargain in the marketplace. Competitors to this would be the Ford Focus ST and maybe the GTI from Volkswagen, but those are both front drivers. Of course, Subaru gives you all-wheel drive. If you take the WRX, the STI, and the BRZ, some people call it the BRZ, Subaru has a very strong dominance in the sports car marketplace. About 10% of all sports or sporty cars are going to Subaru, and they're doing stuff that really nobody else is doing. So I'm going to review this car and how it drives. I'm also going to review it on an everyday car because a lot of people will use this as an everyday machine. First and foremost, bam, it has new styling that definitely continues on with that aggressive look that they had with the previous car, all the bulges and the muscular angular looks, but they've made it a little bit different. You might notice right away that the front windshield and the back window have now been stretched out at a steeper rake. The wheelbase is longer in this car, but overall the dimensions are the same. So that gives you a more sloped front approach to the car, the windshield, and then the back window. So it also gives you interior dimensions. It's not a bad looking car. The one thing I always complain about the WRX, this car comes with 17-inch wheels. If you want the bigger wheels, wow, really big, 18 inches, you gotta go to the STI. That doesn't look right on this car. The car with all of its bulges looks too big for the wheels, not only for the size of the wheels, but also the track. They look like they could be pushed out to the corners just a little bit. The doors are fantastic. They open to almost 90 degrees, making it very easy to get in and out of. Inside, the cabin is bigger for more space if you have to take kids around. The trunk is bigger as well. So in the functionality standpoint, it really is fantastic. Here's a pet peeve though. You want to open that trunk, you have to use the key fob. I can't find a release inside the cabin. There's no release button on the back of the trunk. You have to use the key. Well, what do you need to do? If the car is running, turn the car off and open it up. That really is an annoyance. But inside is a nice change from the previous model. The one thing to keep in mind, of course, this car is based on the Impreza, so a lot of the features in this car you can get in the less expensive Impreza, like the big doors, the bigger interior cabin, and all those features. Now, I mentioned the doors being open and really quite wide, but they also did another thing, which was to drop the mirror off of this A-pillar and put it on the door, and that gives you much more glass area. Actually, the view out of this car is fantastic. You get a really nice view over top of the dash and over top of the hood as well. The interior of the dash has been cleaned up nicely, as I mentioned. Same thing with the Impreza. Now, the previous WRX, I liked the car, but I always thought that the interior looked very cheap considering the price tag, especially if you get the more expensive STI. This is now very simple. You've got 3 dials here for the HVAC system, the radio, and above that is a center screen readout that has the information for the car, but it also provides a backup camera when you put the car into reverse, and it is quite small. Now back to the radio for a moment. It took me about 6 or 8 tries to get my phone. I have an Android phone, an HTC. It took forever to pair it with that. It took a while. Once it was done, it stayed locked in, but that really was much, much harder than it really should be. Hopefully, if you do it once and you get it locked in, it'll work for you every single time. Wonderfully supportive seats in here. If you want to get upgraded materials on the interior, you absolutely can. 3 grades, you get the base WRX, you get the Sport, and then you get the Sport with the tech package. Back seat is very roomy, so if you're somebody who likes to have a performance-oriented sedan and you also need to do kid duty, this car will definitely fit the bill. Easy to get in and out of for all of the occupants. So as a car, it works pretty well. My biggest pet peeve, there's 2 of them actually. One is the armrest. The armrest here is so low, it's really of no use. When you're doing a long drive, it would be nice to have, maybe even a fold-down armrest. That doesn't work for me. And also the gauges behind the steering wheel are really small. When you go to some German brands, they make the numbers or the letters really, really big. Like a Porsche is a perfect example. The tach's right in the middle. You can see it without really, while I'm driving this, I'm looking at how fast am I going? It's a little bit small. So those are a couple of things they could definitely work on. Okay, in between takes here, I tried to call my wife and the Bluetooth kicked me off. I'm not logged in, so Bluetooth definitely is an issue, maybe with Android phones. All right, you might have noticed this WRX is equipped with an automatic. That's right. But if you think about it, Subaru wants to sell more cars, not less cars. And for example, you're going and you're shopping for a Volkswagen Golf GTI, similar kind of sporty car to this. So many people are gravitating towards their dual clutch automatic transmission. And many of the competitors to this car, they're selling more and more automatics. So why doesn't Subaru do it? So what they've done is they've taken the turbocharged 2-liter engine that's used in the Forester turbo and the automatic transmission and modified it and put it into this car. It's not just an automatic, it's a continuously variable transmission. So I'm going to put it in D and head out and tell you a little bit about it. Now, I'm going to go on record again as saying that Subaru makes the best continuously variable transmission in the marketplace. It's an in-house unit. They didn't buy it off the shelf, and it can be very, very aggressive if you want it to be. Think about this. People are going in and buying Porsches. More and more of them are buying their automatic transmission, their PDK, and it's getting to the point where they're selling more of those than they are the manuals. And it's going to be for somebody that likes the idea of having a sporty, all-wheel drive car, and they don't want to do all of the work all of the time. But this car has a bit of a chameleon effect. It has the regular intelligent drive, that's regular kind of automatic, and it has sport. Nice thing about the sport is when you get out of the car and you get back in, it goes to whatever the previous setting was, which is nice. Then you have a button here that's sport sharp, and that really takes things up to a whole different level. It gives you preset ratios in the transmission that mimic regular gears, and when you put your foot into it, it'll drop down like it went from virtually 7th gear down to 2nd gear, and it does a fantastic job. Paddle shifters as well if you want to shift that way. So it's very, very crisp, and it is the best CVT on the market. It's not as fast as, say, a dual clutch PDK style transmission, but it's pretty darn good. Now, with 268 horsepower at your disposal and 258 foot-pounds of torque, there's certainly no lack of power. Now, when you drive this car, initially you know right away that it's different from the previous model. You've got a longer wheelbase. They've made the front springs 39% stiffer with 19% lateral rigidity, and the rear springs are 62% stiffer than the old WRX. So it can feel a little bit choppy. You can see me bouncing around here on city streets, and it depends on the town that you live in. If you have a lot of potholes and rutted conditions, it really can be kind of choppy. Now, the STI is a whole other level. That's a track-ready car that is always on and might be a little bit too much for some people. But this car overall is wonderfully sporty. The steering, even though it's electric, is very direct, and it's probably because of that stiff suspension setup, and the car just feels like one solid piece of metal going down the road. Seats are fantastic, great outward visibility, so a lot of things in its favor, and it really is, I think, starting at 30 grand with all-wheel drive and with the torque vectoring system that it's got is a lot of value for that starting price. Subaru is doing incredibly well in terms of sales in Canada. Everything they bring out seems to sell very, very well, and the secret sauce to their recipe is all-wheel drive. People in Canada flock to their vehicles because we get inclement weather, and these cars certainly make sense. Starting at $30,000, all-wheel drive, lots of power under your right foot, a much stiffer chassis and suspension, and sporty looks, this car is certainly a winner. There's a few things I'd like to see fixed. A trunk release would be one, an armrest would be another, better Bluetooth connectivity, better dials behind the steering wheel, but these are all small things that you learn to live with when you have a smile on your face when you drive a WRX.